Hi everyone, my name is Cole. I'm an MBA 2021 and also co-president of London Business School Black in Business. Super excited for this conversation. I'll hand over to Tabria to kick us off.
Hi everyone, I'm Tabria, co-president of Black in Business along with Cole. I'm originally from the US, really excited to be having this conversation with these two gentlemen. Just for some quick context, Cole and I, it's June 2021 right now. So it's been a full year since some of these conversations have started with us pushing for, I guess, a way forward on racial equality at London Business School, but also thinking about how the death of George Floyd and numerous other events that happened in the past summer really got us started. So we're happy to be here a year later. And I remember Cole and I going through and having conversations about what to do and who to get engaged. And we learned that there was one Black faculty member at LBS. And I happened to be in his class thinking strategically. And I was like, okay, Cole, we'll wait till the class finishes for me to reach out to him, just in case, I don't do well in the class and that's poor representation. So we waited until the class ended and then I reached out and we got the support of JP, who I'm really happy to introduce you guys to. So I'll pass it over to you to do a quick introduction.
Thank you. My name is Jean-Pierre Benoît, a professor of economics at London Business School. Happy to report that Tabria did do well in the class and Cole, so that wasn't an issue. And I'm glad that you reached out to me because you guys are doing great work with the Black in Business Club here at London Business School.
It all worked out. So, I mean, as we think about the past year, I thought it would be good to just for us to all reflect on this path that we've been on in the past year. So what are some of the things you've observed? What surprised you about who's gotten involved or how? I think, on our part, the role that London Business School has played has really been a large part of our story. So just interested to hear your take on LBS's involvement, the world's involvement in us moving forward. We'll start with Cole.
Should I kick off?
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, it's funny because obviously we've been here 2 years and JP, you've been here a lot longer. And one thing that's been super helpful for us as we kind of started on this journey was kind of understanding the context last year, Black Lives Matter, and then obviously me and Tabria getting involved because there's been so many different committees and all that good stuff, depending on the time of year, they were active and not active, all that context is super helpful. I think looking at the last 12 months, one thing that I observed is, there was a lot of pent up demand of different divisions within the school that did want to get involved. Tabria and I have had so many different pillars of the school reach out to say, can we do this? And can we do that? Can we do the next thing? And that's been at least super positive. And I would say somewhat unexpected because I did think it was going to be a lot more difficult to achieve some of the things we have been able to achieve. But to the school's credit, a lot of the infrastructure and the people that make up the infrastructure have been wanting to at least starting to engage and kind of execute on a lot of initiatives. So these last 12 months have been positive. But I think it's also important to remember, it's been a very, very, loud environment with regards to racial equality the last 12 months. And so perhaps an easy environment to do stuff and actually be good to understand a little bit more context also about kind of BLM or what the situation was like. And obviously we want to make sure these 12 months are not just a one-off.
Yeah, interesting. The murder of George Floyd has had a huge impact, as we know. And there have been multiracial, multi-ethnic demonstrations in the United States, and indeed demonstrations throughout the world, even though the murder took place in the United States. And, and the racial inequities really resonate throughout the world. And the impact that it's had here at London Business School has been to give an extra push, So one interesting thing, if we could have a whole discussion on why there's been such a big impact, because at some level, unfortunately, there was nothing really new. The blatant murder of a Black man by the police in the United States wasn't really new. The response of the police department wasn't really new. There was the videos had the impact, COVID's had the impact. But nonetheless, it's given a push. And if you look at London Business School, and I'm glad to hear that you felt London Business School has been very receptive. And London Business School, has seen for many years, it's been obvious that we need to take a lot of steps to make a more inclusive, diverse environment. And other universities too. So you see Harvard, for instance, making a big push. But if you look at that, you could say, but Harvard, it's 50 years old, Harvard. People have been telling this to you. So what exactly is going on now? But without getting into that, part of what's going on is that people have renewed impetus, if you like, to actually take steps, which I think will be positive. But as you mentioned, Cole, I think, as you said very accurately, now there's a lot of light and a lot of fanfare. And the question is, what will happen in a year? Because already we see pushback, not at London Business School, but in lots of domains, right? And I think that's the important thing, to see what actually will come of it.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I mean, there was a report released recently that said, X companies committed to X amount of dollars or things, like how many people actually stuck true to some of those commitments. And percentage is quite small, right? So I think we're in a space where it became the norm that you cannot be silent about some of these issues. And so people had a lot to say in the past year, and that's been interesting to observe. But I guess now we're in a period of, okay, the awareness is here, the acknowledgement is here, but where's the action? Yeah, so, I mean.
Yeah, because we've been in a position where as BIB, we've also been interacting with lots of corporates. And I'd say it's been fairly easy to have the conversations, but even now in these first 12 months, it's not been 100% hit rate in terms of execution. In fact, not nowhere near 100%. So that's going to be the key, is that, okay, people have done a lot of talking, but actually what are they really doing to make this a conversation that goes beyond 12 months and actually go beyond just a conversation, but actually real initiatives?
Yeah, and in fact, it's a very old issue. So if you go back to the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and Martin Luther King did observe that, in some sense, the easy part was getting rid of the racist laws, explicitly racist. I say easy, it wasn't easy by any means, but nonetheless, the marches and everything, but he observed, but the next step is the economic equality and everything else that will follow. And we can see all these years later, it was exactly correct, so.
Yeah.
And that's what you're observing now. There's a kind of easy part, which again is not easy, but nonetheless, in some sense, easier than the next step.
Yeah. I guess with that in mind, are we optimistic about the future? I mean, do we have a choice? I think we have to be optimistic, but yeah, how do you feel the next, 5 to 10 years forward? How do you feel about progress that will be made, or the opportunity for progress?
Should I let JP go first in that?
No, well, we
been around a lot longer than I have.
We want to stay optimistic. Let me say this: that the optimism is in the young people, if you like. So people have been seeing it for years and years and years, then maybe get a bit too cynical and go, "Yeah, I've heard this before. There's the progress." But of course, in any case. There were even progress compared to 1950s. There was huge progress, in the United States and other countries. But nonetheless, we see the up and down, and then get very cynical about it. So a lot of the hope and a lot of the push, I have to say, has come from you guys, because as you say, I've been here for years, pushing. I don't know if they pushed hard enough or not, but without getting as much response as you have managed to get. And I think it's not only because of George Floyd, but because you have maybe an enthusiasm and a perspective that more can be done. So I'll turn it over to Cole.
No, I mean, I'm optimistic. It's not always easy, because sometimes you're reminded of how much more there is to do, and even little things like the conversations around the England football players taking a knee and the backlash around that, and people still trying to suggest that it's got something to do with anything other than racial equality. it is a little bit, disappointing. But as I say, as the young people, we've got to be optimistic. And, I think we're definitely in a better position now in 2021 than, 10 years ago when I first started kind of going to school here, and eventually then going to the corporate world, where, some of these issues were there, but people were pretending completely they didn't even exist. In England, at least. I know things are a bit different in America, but my perspective growing up was always that, nobody wanted to even acknowledge racial inequality. So at least people are starting to admit it.
Well, there was the government report, which was not quite admitting it, but I see.
Yeah. So exactly. So another example, there's still
take a few steps forward and then just
exactly. No, because the thing is, when you have these conversations, you do have to be honest, but I guess a part of you also wants to be positive about things. But as I say, that there is so much work still to be done.
Yeah, I mean, I think to a certain extent, we have to have faith, right? Because if we don't even have faith, then I think we're just doomed from the start. So some of that optimism and some of that just, passion really stems from the fact that I think we just don't have a choice but to get involved. But go ahead.
I was gonna say, I mean, and to that point, obviously, I know Tabria, obviously you grew up in the States. I think you're the same, JP.
I grew up there by way of Haiti.
Okay. I mean, do you guys think there is a difference in the way people think about race in America versus the UK? Because I feel like that report that came out, was it a month or 2 months ago, is a perfect example of how the British think about racism, which is there's still a lot of denying. Whereas my perspective of America is, it's obviously race is a huge issue there, but it's less about, okay, there is no racism, or, kind of little ways to pretend that it doesn't exist, and more about, okay, fine, we have issues, but we're not going to do anything about it. Yeah.
I mean, I think race from the day you're born in the US is kind of in your face and there's no navigating around that. There are people who either plead ignorant or are able to just, ignore it and say, oh no, racism, but things are better now and things have changed and etc. But I don't think anyone would blatantly produce a report, that says any of these things. A lot of things will be maybe done a little bit more subtly, but I don't think anyone can deny the history, although they're trying, right? We've seen what's happening in Texas, right? About banning the history from school. So there are things that happen, but it's not as in your face as that report was, especially during a time like this. Although I guess because of what's happening in Texas, maybe I take that back.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big country, right? With lots of different views. So it's hard really to say what the country thinks. And even the UK is smaller, but you have, London is different than other cities, and, Scotland is different. And so that's part of the issue. If you just make a blanket statement, you're covering so many different people and communities.
That's true. Let's take a step back and think about, I guess, the role that all the members of the LBS community play in terms of this progress. So I know we spoke about how instrumental a lot of between the marketing teams, recruitment and admissions, a lot of people got on board with what we were trying to do really early. I think we're interested in hearing, what role do you think faculty, for example, should play in being part of this progress? So, I mean, you used to sit on the D&I committee, so that's actually being part of it. But yeah, how do you see faculty getting involved and stepping up going forward?
Well, I mean, if I look at the role that London Business School plays, I think there are several levels that happen. So one, the most basic level maybe, is just making sure that it's an inclusive environment, and by that I mean an environment where people are treated with respect and provided the opportunities, that they deserve, that everybody deserves. And then the next level, which you just touched on, is looking at our recruitment and hiring practices and promotion practices, and making sure that they are proper, so to speak, that we're doing things right. And maybe final level, our motto here is, I think, to have a profound impact on the way the world does business, you know. And if I look at that, I'll interpret that to be not just business in the business sense of businesses, but, you know, the way people go around their business, you know. And so we want to have impacts at all those levels, you know, and the most basic level is just what we're doing, you know, and what's happening. But beyond that, if you talked about the role of faculty, for instance, you know, part of it is in our teaching, and you two have been very instrumental, for instance, in calling out the faculty for the cases they use and the examples. And it's very easy, you know, and that's one level. If we look at the UK report to say, oh, I'm not being racist, I'm just giving you random examples. Oh, they all happen to be white males, you know, straight white males. Oh, maybe they're not so random after all, you know. That might be what people call implicit, I don't know, bias, or whatever you want to call it. So at one level is just going back and looking at what's done there. But then there's the research, there's everything else. So maybe an academic's basic responsibility is, you know, to be honest and rigorous and truthful without trying to sound too corny about it. But that involves things you do explicitly, but also things you do implicitly, you know, and understanding that if you look at the composition of London Business School, it's not just happenstance, and it's not just because, oh, it's a meritocracy and I'm just going about looking for the best people, and this just happens to be the best people, you know. You're not giving enough thought to what's happening, you know, and to the implicit ways that you're doing things. So I think that's one of the important reasons for the Black in Business Club and the other clubs that are here as well, as to just have people go back and just to think more about what's happening, because it's very easy to think, no, I'm just doing everything fine, and just to look at the outlook. So, you know, and as you know, that's one important reason for diversity, because the people who are diverse just look around and it just hits them and say, but wait a second, what are you doing? You know, what's other people haven't even noticed, you know. So people often speak of diversity. They think of diversity means, oh, let me get these people who aren't as good as the other people who I would get if I was just doing things by meritocracy. But that's not true. You're not doing a ranking of the top to the bottom, you know. You're taking people and looking at people in a lot of ways which have nothing to do with meritocracy, you know. And diversity actually, for the many things it does, but one is actually just improves, you know, that increases the quality. It doesn't decrease the quality. That's just wrong, I think, to think that way.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, I love the Trevor Noah interview he did when a lot of this stuff was happening. And he said something like, when we're pushing diversity, we're not asking you to hire me because I'm Black. We're asking you to stop not hiring me because I'm Black. So it's just about opening the door, not pushing us through just because, you know, there's lots of talented people that aren't getting in because of implicit biases. And it's just about removing some of those biases.
Yeah, look at the criteria you're using, and, you know, also understanding that the door has been closed for so long, you know, so to some extent you have to I don't know, factor that in as well.
Yeah. I think you need to just go back to the drawing board and rethink and rewrite and reprogram some of these policies that have been in place forever that are excluding people that you haven't even realized that they're excluding. And I guess, Cole, as students and soon to be alum, and thinking about, you know, all the work that we've done this year and the work that we do in business school, it's like, okay, we're going into the real world soon. And I think we have a responsibility to carry these conversations forward. So whether, you know, for banking for you or within retail for me, both industries that could use some conversations around how they can contribute. Like, what do you see the role that you play in the future being?
Yeah, and it's a good question. And you think we spent the last 12 months talking about this stuff constantly. But the first thing I'll say, it's not easy. It's, you know, when you walk into you know, your new workplace, and, you know, you're one of maybe one or two or three others, and everyone else looks completely different to you. It's not that easy to just, you know, start a conversation about race. You know, it feels like the whole organization is trying to sometimes not talk about it, because, you know, the corporate can put out statements, That's very different from having 300 people in an office who are just going about their day job. Do you know what I mean? And so sometimes, as much as you want to talk about this stuff, it's not that simple. But as you say, for sure, we do have responsibility, and it's just about finding the ways to influence. And I'd say actually organizations have a lot of responsibility to facilitate some of these conversations. And so I think about my first day at my internship at Bank of America last summer. You know, my very first day, one of the senior speakers was a guy called Bernie Mentor, who's like, really, really senior person at Bank of America. And within the first few statements he made, he started to talk about Black Lives Matter and George Floyd and some of the things that the bank needs to do and some of the initiatives they have in place. Something as simple as that, you know, framing the topic for the entire internship class, then at least makes it easier to then come into the conversation as a new associate, you know, because I think sometimes you do have to be careful to think, as someone new into a firm, think I'm just going to start talking about, you know, George Floyd and racism. It's not something you can just bring up that easily. It's just about contextualizing it. And I think firms can make it a lot simpler for us to have some of the impacts that we want to make going forward.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think it's funny. So I was speaking with a company recently about kind of shaping a job description, and the hiring manager blatantly said, like, look, I've seen your LinkedIn profile, I've seen your background, like, you know, we have a huge problem with, you know, Black designers and getting them into the industry and, you know, providing the commercial impact that comes as a result of it. And she was like, this doesn't have to be your job description, but I think, like, is this something that you would like to work on? And I was like, wow, for the first time, you know, somebody's just saying, like, off the bat, like, look, we acknowledge we have a problem. You're clearly really passionate about this. Obviously it's not your job, but like, would you like it to be part of your job? And I thought that was really exciting to see that, okay, like someone's recognizing and taking note of the conversations that are happening.
But you know what, that is it. But that's brilliant because, and that's kind of one of the reasons I'm so happy we've done what we've done, is because now when people interact with us, hopefully it's because they know what we've done, and that will be a part of the reason for the interaction. But if I'm completely honest, me, for example, I'm doing an internship right now. I'm pretty sure most people would have seen some of the things that I've done, and it's a part of me. No one has brought it up once. And that makes a difference, because it all of a sudden opens the door for a conversation, or it makes you think, are they shutting the door to make sure conversation doesn't happen? And it's something to think about.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember at one of our first conversations with Michael, and he was saying, like, you want these companies that are actively joining the conversation and, you know, almost in your face about it. So you feel that you're going into an inclusive environment, speaking about what we think LBS could and should be. And he's right. So now it's like, I'm looking at companies with a whole new lens, and it's like, what are you saying about this? Or are you just waiting for like the one Black employee to come in so that you can say something about it? Like, what's your approach? And so, yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the next few years. With that in mind, I guess, what's the end goal for us? What does progress look like? What does success look like in the future? Well, maybe JP, we can go with you. What do you think?
End goal, what? So, you know, if like 50 years ago, or even 20 years ago, you had said, when will we know that racial equality has been achieved? Someone might have said a bit flippantly, when a Black man or a woman is elected president of the United States. You know, that will tell you, because, you know, I say flippantly because it's something we'd never expect to see, something I certainly never expected to see.
Right.
But at the same time, we saw it happened, and what did it mean about equality? As great as it was, you know, as important as it was, at first instance, it didn't mean that the next president wouldn't make nakedly racist appeals. So it's hard to say. You know, obviously we want to look at, you know, I'll say obviously as an economist, socioeconomic indicators, you know, income, wealth, health, you know, representation. So there's so many ways that we're so far. Well, actually, I feel like I don't have to answer your question, because we're so far from the end game that I'll be happy when we reach the point where we're so close to the end game that we have to worry about defining, are we there or not, you know? But short term, if we just look at those obvious indicators, you know, you know, a lot of the indicators that people say COVID has brought to the forefront, but they were always there to begin with, you know, and that's, you know, as I said off the top, part of the funny, I don't like to use that term, but of the impact of the George Floyd is a lot of things were brought to the forefront, which were always actually just there anyway.
Yeah.
Not a question, doesn't take a lot of sophisticated.
I was having a conversation with another professor last week, and we were talking about this very same thing. And I was like, look, you have to realize we have a long way to go. Like, it's nice to, you know, sing Kumbaya and think about all the things that we've accomplished, but you're right, especially from a socioeconomic perspective. What is it in the US? Like, Black households have like 1/10 or something of the wealth. Don't quote me on that. I don't know. But it's something that drastic, right? About in terms of the disparity in wealth. And so whether it's economics, health, education, there's a long way to go. And I think people fail to realize that.
I feel like we spent a lot of this conversation saying how much work there is to do.
Which is good, because my next question is like, what's the one message we want to leave people with, whoever watches this, whether you're a prospective student or just somebody who wants to, you know, be part of the community? And I think the message is engage, because one, there's a lot of work to do, clearly. And it's also work that, you know, we can't do alone, that shouldn't be only on the Black community to do. And so, yeah, I think that's my one message, is just figure out how you're part of the progress, how you're part of the solution, small ways, large ways, whatever the case is. Don't be like afraid to fail, or don't let fear avoid you from getting in and being and joining the conversation. So my message is to engage.
Yeah, I'm gonna steal Tesco's slogan, which is every little helps. Fundamentally, it's like whether you're Black, Asian, white, every little thing you can do can make a big difference to this. And really, you just got to be brave. Be brave to have some of these conversations and stick your neck out. Be brave if you're an ally to say the wrong thing, and learn. And really, that's what I think is going to make the game changing.
Even us, right, within our own community, we feel like sometimes people just
yeah.
Yes, I'm Black, but like, don't talk about it.
No, it's true for her, but and I think that's been one of the biggest things about these last 12 months. And as JP says, these issues have been here for a long time, but now people can feel more comfortable talking about these issues because of what's happened. And I think as BIB, we've been fairly loud, and I think one of the reasons it's been so important to be loud is to keep the conversation going, even if it's just about another post or sharing something, another interview, whatever. It's just kind of something that keeps the momentum going so that people can keep talking about it.
I think you guys have put it well. And, there are lots of ways to engage, as you say. So some people are loud by nature and some people aren't loud. And I don't know that we have to force everyone to be loud or not, but even in your own quiet way, you can acknowledge things, and you can, as Cole said, not boo people who are taking a knee, so that's like so minimal a thing to do. But, I think prospective students, when they come here, can just make sure to, because you two are going to be leaving, so we need to, I'll still be here, but we need to make sure at narrow London Business School level to keep us honest and to make sure that we're actually following through in what we say we're going to do.
Perfect. So I think that's a great note to end this. We'll let Cole get off to his internship and you get your daughter to school.
Thank you.
Thanks for this.
All right. Good. Thank you. And we'll see you. Bye.
Good. Bye.